We're talking Cup Series here, not necessarily like a bold, wild predictions, but just kind of where I think people are going to be and where teams are going to be at. If you want to support me, support Pearce, support the work that we do, you can join the Patreon below in the description, or you can just go to this link above me. I'm going to try and focus on not having things on the screen this year and kind of talking about it because I want to protect people supporting us and getting everything there. In terms of live shows, we're still kind of on the fence as if they're going to be behind a paywall or live. Let me know what you guys kind of think and want. I would prefer to keep them free because I would like to really go head-to-head between the other people doing live shows, specifically for the Cup Series, and then just be live for Truck Xfinity. But, kind of give me an idea of what you want to know. Let's focus on two different aspects last year between how the year progressed, where people ended up, and kind of how I see this year going. So clearly last year, start of the year, just a wash, okay? Daytona, Fontana, Las Vegas. In my mind, yes, Las Vegas would kind of show some early speed of intermediates, but for the most part, Daytona, Fontana, Las Vegas, and Phoenix. I would even count Atlanta and Coda to be a wash, okay? We can look at them. We can see some ideas of how things might progress at certain tracks. Like Las Vegas gave some early insights to how people would do at intermediate tracks, specifically Joe Gibbs having an early advantage and understanding what to do at intermediate tracks. For the most part, that was kind of a wash. Once we get through the year, we get to pretty much my favorite part of the year, and that is late April to May to the Coca-Cola 600. And those races are Dover, Darlington, Kansas, and Charlotte. I think those four races are absolutely crucial to understand how people are going to run once we get to places like Pocono, Michigan, and certainly later in the year entering the playoffs. Because for the most part, the summer is a bunch of short tracks and road courses, which, in my opinion, least fun part of the whole year. Okay, the fact that we got to go to a stupid Chicago street course is going to make me want to kill myself this year. So we have really the chance in April through May to nail things, and then once we get into the playoffs, that's where it goes, because clearly at the end of the year, we're basically just going to intermediate tracks, and we go to some short tracks, things like that, but for the most part, the real racing is the intermediate tracks. Okay, so I just want to focus on intermediates for this portion of the video right here. When we look at intermediate tracks last year, this was one thing, as I said, it showed kind of where we were at. So actually, before I do that, when we look at results for Las Vegas, okay, I understand, I just said let's kind of wash it out, but I want to give an example of why Las Vegas and the intermediates were a bit different. So when we look at Las Vegas, Alex Bowman won that race. We had Kyle Larson finish second. Chastain finished third. And I can't find fourth. It was Kyle Busch. And your fifth car that rounded out, that was, where are we at for the fifth position? Wow, it was William Byron. I'm so sorry that took me so long. So when we look at the intermediate tracks, and then we look at how those guys were and how they continued throughout the year, your best driver on intermediate tracks was Ross Chastain, followed by Truex, Kyle Larson, Hamlin, Logano, Blaney, Bell, Kyle Busch, Chase Elliott, William Byron, Harvick, Reddick, Bowman, Kurt Busch. Those are your best drivers on intermediate tracks last year. Those are your top 14 drivers, okay? And Suarez would be the 15th driver. So we did see that early Las Vegas would show us that we want to focus on the Toyotas. We understand that Hendrick is going to be good, and we didn't see a total change in how those guys performed. Going back to how we approached last year, it's all about trying to be ahead of the curve and how things happen. So last year we had the car come out. A lot of these teams were just working with a really short supply of parts. We got to remember that there was a partage shortage. We got to remember that, these teams never worked on this type of stuff. This is a brand new car. NASCAR didn't care about the safety, blah, blah, blah. We had a lot of things going. But what were the signs that showed us certain things and certain drivers? Well, earlier in the year, we would see that the Joe Gibbs cars would start rounding off pretty fast laps during these races. At Las Vegas, they were fast early. At Dover, they showed a ton of speed. They end up wrecking out. They have issues. Denny Hamlin's going to win that race twice, and he got spun out both times. He blows a tire, and then Cody Ware takes him out or spins in front of him. He goes a lap down. We saw earlier in the year that, hey, Joe Gibbs is somebody we want to target. We saw earlier in the year that, hey, Chastain is showing, a true knack for this car right off the bat. Okay, and the fact that Chastain has the most top fives out of anybody last year was absolutely insane. 15 top fives, 21 top 10s, 23 top 15s, 26 top 20s. 28 top 25s. That is absolutely insane. Running the most amount of laps in the top 5, running the most amount of laps in the top 10 running positions. Like, that is absolutely insane. Now, people don't talk about those tracks, and a lot of those came from intermediate tracks. Yes, he had some good races at Road America, New Hampshire, even Bristol, but for the most part, a lot of those were taking place at intermediate tracks. I think that's the one. I honestly believe that when we look at NASCAR and how these teams perform and stuff, I think it is absolutely crucial for you to separate the tracks and understand them, and understand what makes these tracks so differently, and understand what helps people at certain intermediate tracks might end up, hurting them in short tracks. Am I just rambling? I might just be at this point. Anyway, going through last year's intermediate tracks, yet again, it was Chastain, Truex, Larson, Hamlin, Logano. The fact that Hamlin was wildly consistent and even being involved in that scuffle with Chastain at Gateway, and even Larson, wrecking. Actually, we don't have. That's interesting, because Pearce did not include Darlington in either of these races. Now, they did get crazy. Darlington, first one, turned into a wreck fest. Darlington 2 was also quite super with people catching on fire late in that race, so that is interesting that he's removed that. Anyway, little refresher. I don't know why I did that. Anyway, let's get into this year's event. Let's get into this stuff real fast, at least these teams and everything. Going in alphabetical order based on teams. Bubba Wallace, Tyler Reddick. I think Reddick will probably just fit right back into where Kurt Busch was. When we look at how Kurt Busch was performing before he died, turning the page, absolutely going stupid fast. So wins Kansas, has a has a pretty decent car at Gateway, has a pretty decent car at Nashville, really fast car at New Hampshire, and that was his last race. We saw him turn the page a lot. Later in the year, specifically Las Vegas, I told you, hey, this is going to be the one race I want to play a shitload of Bubba Wallace. Bubba Wallace is going to be fast. Then he decides to, attempt murder Larson. But we saw 2311 finally, after all these years, after all this time, gain speed, show speed. And I believe if Kurt Busch would have stayed healthy, we would have seen Kurt Busch compete for a lot more top 10s right when the Toyotas were really showing up. Bubba Wallace, in terms of skill level between him and Kurt Busch is far better than he was. In terms of Reddick, Bubba Wallace, Reddick is far better than Bubba Wallace is, okay? And Bubba Wallace was still able to show quite a lot of speed at these tracks, okay? So the fact that Reddick is going here, I think I personally believe it's a slight increase from what he was running at RCR. And that's mainly due to the TRD alliance. RCR and ECR has been having to do a lot of the stuff on their own recently. Last couple of years. The fact that I think Toyota is giving people a lot more factory support than Chevy is right now, I think that is going to help Reddick out a bit more. Are we going to see him, run the wall at these tracks? Are we still going to see him compete for wins? Are we still going to see, like Reddick is going from like a potential of running 7th each and every week to running like 6th or 5th each and every week? It's still going to be up in the air because this year is going to be very, very competitive between a lot of good teams. But anyway, that's my real takeaway. Michael McDowell, same thing. Like I can never project Michael McDowell to do anything. Todd Gillen, consistently underpriced last year. I don't understand that. We were inning on Todd Gillen a lot. Probably be the same thing there. Larson, Elliott, William Byron, Alex Bowman. We know what we're getting from these guys. I think Larson can perform a bit more consistent because it seemed to me in nearly all the races that Larson was in absolute phenomenal shape. He kept blowing motors. Now that everything is provided by a third party, that has to be Cliff Daniels, and that has to be Hendrick pushing the envelope for Larson. Yet again, it was a new car. We're trying to figure things out. I mean, we even saw, Joe Gibbs have overheating issues earlier in the year at Auto Club and at other tracks just because they weren't necessarily sure what they could push, what they couldn't push. I like that Larson was pushing that amount of pushing the threshold that much. I think Larson goes back to being just an absolute killer contender. I think it was very brutal last year going to this car and not necessarily having the amount of practice that they used to have. I think this practice is stupid. Yet again, it kind of leans into my argument for super speedways getting more and more stupid because you can't practice racing around cars. Okay, you can't practice bump drafting. You can't practice being in a pack. Same thing here. Like last year was very difficult on these teams working on things with limited parts. Like the teams would come to the track with one backup car for 4 drivers. So the fact that I think we are slowly getting past that, I think that's going to lean towards Larson being able to not necessarily repeat what he did in 2021, but be the head honcho of Hendrick versus it being Chase Elliott. And Byron Bowman's still going to have their days. We'll focus on them primarily on a race-to-race, practice-by-practice, lap-by-lap breakdown each and every week. Joe Gibbs Racing, we know what Denny Hamlin has. Martin Truex Jr. was so close last year. I don't know. These guys lost so many races they should have won. It is absolutely ridiculous. And the field caught up to Joe Gibbs finally. They had everything all year. They had the best car at the intermediate tracks. They had the best cars each and every week. And they just kept making mistakes. And then they would win the races where they shouldn't have won. Like Coca-Cola 600. Joe Gibbs misses. They absolutely miss. It's Hendrick's day. Then we have the yellows. We have back-to-back yellows. Coca-Cola 600 turns into a wreck fest, and Hamlin wins it. That's not a race Hamlin should have won. That was a race Hendrick should have won. And then vice versa. Like all the races that Joe Gibbs should have won, like Kansas too. That's the only one I can think of right off the top of my head right now. But Joe Gibbs, they just couldn't close the deal out. Same thing with Truex. Truex should have won at least 3 races last year. Just couldn't close it down. I think it is safe to say that the auto owners insurance thing, we can kind of brush that aside. I'm not really leaning on that being a thing anymore. But I think Hamlin, Truex, Bell are going to be fantastic. Ty Gibbs, I am so happy that I get to root for the 54 machine in the Cup Series. What he's going to do, I think Ty Gibbs is going to struggle in a sense of wow, he's not getting any wins. I think week in and week out, we can project Gibbs to probably finish around 16th to 15th each and every week. It is a tough series here, and nothing much is changing there. Stenhouse, fully funded. Happy to see that. It's amazing how good JTG has been since they've gone down to one car. I think that just helps Stenhouse out. Colleague Racing, going to have AJ, going to have Haley. The fact that it did change later in the year that AJ was not scheduled to run as many races as he ended up running. He ran Phoenix at the end of the year because they didn't plan on doing that. They just wanted to get him more rep time and stuff. He's going to be a contender at the road courses. I think he's going to run pretty decent at the short tracks as well. I'm very much looking forward to Colleague being a team that I'm not as worried about with mechanical failures entering this year as it was last year. Legacy Motor Club with Gregson and Jones. I think he's going to run pretty decent. He ran pretty decent last year in the short amount of starts that he ran and the short amount of experience that he had. And that was mainly at the plate races and stuff. And the reason I'm mentioning that is, let me get Gregson here. The fact that he was able to, I know he ran Pocono. He started running more in the year, too. He ran Pocono, ran Michigan, Richmond, outside of the plate races. Kansas, too. And then at the end of the year, really got a ton of experience down with Texas, Roval, Las Vegas, Homestead, Martinsville. I think Gregson can very easily probably be around a 21st, 22nd place driver week in and week out, if not more, because we had seen Eric Jones and the 43 crew get up there, get that win, and they put themselves in a position to win. They didn't have the best car at Darlington, but the fact that people kept raking out, the fact it's not about getting luck. It's not about getting lucky. It's about putting yourself in positions to take advantage of people running into issues. That's exactly how Jones got that win. I like him in the 43. I think Gregson is going to be able to move up by years, and certainly by the playoff time at those intermediate tracks there, move up to being around and 17th to probably 15th place driver. But Jones is probably going to compete for fast laps as well. Also, as we're kind of going back here, and we'll talk about that in another video, but we saw fast laps being distributed to people who weren't the leader. We're seeing that more and more. And Jones is a clear contender to get fast laps wherever he is in the pack. Okay? RFK Racing, Keselowski, Busher getting that late win at Bristol. We saw a huge improvement in RFK's speed and ability with these cars late in the year. I'm looking forward to it. I think Keselowski, and we saw Keselowski get more and more consistent at Homestead and Martinsville. He was up there at Texas, at Bristol, Darlington too. It really was a turnaround in the second part of the season that started at Richmond. Actually, it started at New Hampshire. Because from New Hampshire forward, Keselowski started running more consistent versus what he had been doing before in the season, and that's just taking over a new team, having a lot more on your plate. I think Keselowski will very easily probably be around a consistent 18th to 17th place driver this year. Same thing with Chris Buescher. We'll see Chris Buescher have more speed, certainly at the intermediate tracks this year as well. Let's talk about RCR and Kyle Busch. I want to, and I think Pearce is on the other side. I could be wrong. I want to be overweight on Kyle Busch to start the year. This is a situation to where I don't want to wait till the results are out and people figure out where Kyle is going to fall into, whether it's an improvement or a step back. Because I honestly do not know. It seems to me like Kyle Busch is happy here. It seems to me like RCR is happy to have him here. That's why they're paying him. They're not paying him, the amount of money that Joe Gibbs was. But RCR is, I fully believe, yes, he's got sponsorship, but I fully believe RCR paid him out of pocket with money that they just had and then secured sponsorships for him, to be honest with you. I don't think his contract is fully funded by the majority of these sponsorships. I think a lot of the sponsorship money is going to RCR. I think a lot of the money that Kyle Busch is getting up front is coming from the organization as a whole. Clearly, he's going to get some from the sponsorships as well. But RCR wants him here. RCR knows what they have with races that they have seen Tyler Reddick have, and Kyle Busch is a far more experienced racer than Tyler Reddick. He understands what he wants from cars. We have seen practice and the lack thereof really hinder Kyle Busch. Ever since COVID happened, he's been having to adapt. The fact that we saw so many potential races last year for him to get wins and for him to be there, I want to be very overweight early on Kyle Busch. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But this is a situation to where it's clear as day to me that I don't want to have a wait and see approach. I want to be aggressive on Kyle Busch. Okay. Rick Ware, they're there. Spire Motorsports, the fact that Ty Dillon's going there, I think it's going to be just an identical run to like Landon Castle. Like, we know what he has. We know where they're going to be at. Stuart Haas, I like Harvick on his last year, probably going to get a win. We saw him have speed late in the year and certainly increase as the year went on. Ran into some bumps early. Eric Almirola, Chase Briscoe, pit road, going to be a week-to-week thing. Ryan Preece, we saw him run very good in the Truck Series. We know he has speed. I think the fact that Stewart finally has somebody that he wants in the car, I think they're going to put the most amount of money behind Ryan Preece, oddly enough, because Harvick's out the door, okay? Yes, he has the money. He has the funding. Of course, they're going to give him good equipment. But Ryan Preece is the future of this team because Eric Almirola is going to retire. Ryan Preece has far more skill than Chase Briscoe. So the fact that the 4 and the 41 are probably going to be at the forefront of this team, I want to. Yet same thing with Kyle Busch. I want to be overweight on Ryan Preece early this year, and if I'm wrong, I'm wrong there. Cindric, Ryan Blaney, Joey Logano for Team Penske. We know what they have there. Joey Logano was consistent throughout the entire year. It was wild that Blaney didn't get a win. He came so close so many times. It just didn't work out for him. You want to talk about two of the most consistent drivers. When you look at the results in general, it's Elliott, Chastain, Logano, Blaney, and Bell. Logano and Blaney, consistent top 5 drivers the entire year. Just a shame that Blaney didn't get that victory. They're going to be there for real. Cindric, we're seeing Cindric struggle a lot. Just this is a car to drive. It's a tough series to be in. Ryan Blaney, Joey Logano, I'm looking forward to that. Ross Chastain, Daniel Suarez, I'm fully expecting Chastain to, yet again, probably take another step forward. He's gotten better every single year. He's gotten better throughout the year that he's been at Trackhouse. He's gotten, or not throughout, he's only been there 2 years. But like every month, we've seen improvement in Trackhouse, the organization, and we've seen it with Chastain. We've seen it with Suarez. I'm looking forward to them being up there. As I've said before, Chastain was the second best driver on average for the entire year in terms of finishes, in terms of speed. When we look at him in terms of, look at the road courses, Ross Chastain falls to 8th best, but at the short flat tracks, Ross Chastain is second. At intermediate, Ross Chastain is number 1. They're right up there. When we look at intermediates and short flat tracks, we see a lot of consistency. Like Chastain is up there. We see Joey Logano right up there. We're seeing Denny Hamlin right up there. We're seeing Kyle Larson up there. We're seeing Blaney as well, Bell, Kyle Busch. It's really the same drivers. Like the guys who were fast last year, they were really just fast in general. Wow, that was a terrible sentence. If you support me in Pearce, if you go through the folders and you go through past seasons 2016 to 22, and you go to the Cup Series seasonal 2022, and then you look at the Dietrich data, that's really what I'm using to explain a lot of the stuff with. It's a lot of data there that you can look through. If you scroll all the way to the bottom right, go to the road, short flat tracks, laps led, intermediate data, that'll give you a ton of info that I'm really basing a lot of my stuff off of when I look back at how these guys were last year. And when I look forward to this year, the fact that we don't have as many kneecaps for these teams as we had before, and what I mean by that is we don't have guys having to worry about, is this car going to be safe? Because it's not. They're not going to make a lot of adjustments. It's still going to be unsafe as hell. But we're not going to have the cars, sitting on the roadblocks when they blow tires. We're not going to have, at least we shouldn't have, as many mechanical issues this year, mechanical parts issues, things like that, as I predicted earlier last year. So entering this year, I would probably start really heavy looking at everything from probably New Hampshire forward. So that's New Hampshire, Pocono, Indy, Michigan, Richmond, Watkins Glen, Daytona 2, Darlington, Kansas 2, Bristol, Texas, Dega, Roval, Las Vegas, Homestead, Martinsville, and Phoenix. That's probably the point of last year that I would probably look forward at entering this year primarily. We can look back at other tracks too, like when they go back to like Fontana and stuff like that to get an idea of where teams are going to be. But looking at New Hampshire forward from last year, at the end of last year, about the second half of the season, entering this season, and I start looking at that specifically, who were up there. It was Chastain, it was Ryan Blaney, it was Kevin Harvick, it was Denny Hamlin, it was Kyle Busch. Actually, my bad. It was William Byron, my bad. Kyle Busch kept having DNFs. It was, honestly, it was pretty wild that Briscoe got so deep in the playoffs with a 5th place finish at Texas, 10th at Dega, 9th at the Roval, 4th at Las Vegas, DNF'd at Homestead, 10th at Martinsville, and 4th at Phoenix. That is an insane run from Chase Briscoe there. And then Keselowski had tremendous improvement, a lot of green at the back end of the back half of his season. That's kind of where I'm at there. I think this year is probably going to be, specifically at the start of the year, like a Daytona, it's really a shame that we don't have more practice. It really is. I think that would tremendously improve the racing here. I don't know, I'm just kind of rambling at this point. Anyway, that's kind of like my takeaway, my review, my early look at like the teams and stuff. More of these videos, I want to focus primarily on how the fast laps and everything got distributed between different people in the truck, in actually all the series and stuff like that. But yeah, that's kind of like my Cup Series early preview. So thank you for listening. If you want to support me, support Pearce and everything, you can join the Patreon and support us and give us your money. I do appreciate it. Thank you.